LGBT is an initialism that stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. In use since the 1992, the initialism, as well as some of its common variants, functions as an umbrella term for certain sexualities and gender identities. The LGBT term is an adaptation of the initialism LGB, which began to replace the term gay or gay and lesbian in reference to the broader LGBT community beginning in the mid to late 1980s. Two were not inclusive of transgender people. The shorter term LGB is still used instead of LGBT. It may refer to anyone who is non-heterosexual or non-cisgender, instead of exclusively to people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. To recognize this inclusion, a popular variant, LGBTQ, adds the letter Q for those who identify as queer or are questioning their sexual or gender identity. The initialisms LGBT or GLBT are not agreed to by everyone that they are supposed to include. History of the term: the Stonewall Inn in the gay village of Greenwich Village, Manhattan, site of the June 1969 Stonewall riots, the cradle of the modern LGBT rights movement and an icon of LGBT culture, is adorned with rainbow pride flags. The first widely used term, homosexual, now a term used primarily in scientific contexts, has at times carried negative connotations in the United States. Gay became a popular term in the 1970s. As lesbians forged more public identities, the phrase gay and lesbian became more common. A dispute as to whether the primary focus of their political aim should be feminism or gay rights led to the dissolution of some lesbian organizations, including Daughters of Bilitis, which was founded by Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, but disbanded in 1970 following disputes over which goal should take precedence. As equality was a priority for lesbian feminists, disparity of roles between men and women or butch and femme were viewed as patriarchal. Lesbian feminists eschewed gender role play that had been pervasive in BOS, as well as the perceived chauvinism of gay men. Many lesbian feminists refused to work with gay men or take up their causes. Lesbians who held the essentialist view that they had been born homosexual and used the descriptor lesbian to define sexual attraction often considered the separatist opinions of lesbian feminists to be detrimental to the cause of gay rights. Bisexual and transgender people also sought recognition as legitimate categories within the larger minority community. 14. In the late 1970s and the early 1980s, after the elation of change following group action in the 1969 Stonewall riots in New York City, some gays and lesbians became less accepting of bisexual or transgender people. Critics like whom said that transgender people were acting out stereotypes, and bisexuals were simply gay men or lesbian women who were afraid to come out and be honest about their identity. Each community has struggled to develop its own identity, including whether and how to align with other gender and sexuality-based communities, at times excluding other subgroups. These conflicts continue to this day. LGBTQ activists and artists have created posters to raise consciousness about the issue since the movement began. From about 1988, activists began to use the initialism LGBT in the United States. Not until the 1990s within the movement did gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people gain equal respect. This spurred some organizations to adopt new names, as the GLBT Historical Society did in 1999. Although the LGBT community has seen much controversy regarding universal acceptance of different member groups, bisexual and transgender individuals, in particular, have sometimes been marginalized by the larger LGBT community, The term LGBT has been a positive symbol of inclusion, despite the fact that LGBT does not nominally encompass all individuals in smaller communities. See variants below. The term is generally accepted to include those not specifically identified in the four-letter initialism. Overall, the use of the term LGBT has, over time, largely aided in bringing otherwise marginalized individuals into the general community. Transgender actress Candice Kane, in 2009, described the LGBT community as the last great minority, noting that we can still be harassed openly and be called out on television. In 2016, GLAAD Media Reference Guide states that LGBTQ is the preferred initialism, being more inclusive of younger members of the communities who embrace queer as a self-descriptor. Some people consider queer to be a derogatory term originating in hate speech and reject it, especially among older members of the community. Variants. Many variants exist, including variations that change the order of the letters, including LGBT+. At least some of the components of sexuality regarding hetero, bi, straight, and also gender are stated to be on different spectrums of sexuality. Other common variants also exist, such as LGBTQ. 29, with the standing for asexual, aromantic, or agender, and LGBTQ+, where TE+ represents those who are part of the community, but for whom LGBTQ does not accurately capture or reflect their identity. Longer acronyms have prompted criticism for their length, sometimes being referred to as alphabet soup, and the implication that the acronym refers to a single community is also controversial. Although identical in meaning, LGBT may have a more feminist connotation than GLBT, as it places the L for lesbian first. LGBT may also include additional QS for queer or questioning, sometimes abbreviated with a question mark and sometimes used to mean anybody not literally LG, B or T, producing the variants LGBTQ and LGBTQQ. The order of the letters has not been standardized. In addition to the variations between the positions of the initial L or G, the mentioned, less common letters, if used, may appear in almost any order. In Spain, LGTB is used, that is, reversing the letters B and T. Variant terms do not typically represent political differences within the community, but arise simply from the preferences of individuals and groups. The terms pansexual, homosexual, fluid and queer identified are regarded as falling under the umbrella term bisexual and therefore are considered a part of the bisexual community. Some use LGBT+ to mean LGBT and related communities. Other variants may have AU for unsure, AC for curious, another T for transvestite, ATS, or 2 for two-spirit persons, or UNSOF for straight allies. The inclusion of straight allies in the LGBT acronym has proven controversial, as many straight allies have been accused of using LGBT advocacy to gain popularity and status in recent years, and various LGBT activists have criticized the heteronormative worldview of certain straight allies. Some may also add AP for polyamorous, an H for HIV-affected, or an O for other. The initialism LGBT has seen use in India to encompass the Hera third gender identity and the related subculture. Adding the term allies to the initialism has sparked controversy, with some seeing the inclusion of ally in place of asexual/aromantic/agender as a form of LGBT erasure. There is also the acronym QUILT queer and questioning, unsure, intersex, lesbian, transgender and two-spirit, bisexual, asexual and aromantic, and gay and genderqueer. Similarly, LGBTQ+ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer/questioning, asexual and many other terms such as non-binary and pansexual. In Canada, the community is sometimes identified as LGBTQ2, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer and two-spirit. Depending on which organization is using the acronym, the choice of acronym changes. Businesses and the CBC often simply employ LGBT as a proxy for any longer acronym. Private activist groups often employ LGBTQ+, whereas public health providers favor the more inclusive LGBTQ+ to accommodate twin-spirited Indigenous peoples. For a time, the Pride Toronto organization used the much lengthier acronym LGBTQ2SA, but appears to have dropped this in favor of simpler wording. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was also criticized for using the 2S LGBTQ+ acronym.
Transgender inclusion. The term trans asterisk has been adopted by some groups as a more inclusive alternative to transgender, where trans, without the asterisk, has been used to describe trans men and trans women, while trans asterisk covers all non-cisgender, genderqueer identities, including transgender, transsexual, transvestite, genderqueer, gender fluid, non-binary, genderfuck, genderless, agender, non-gendered, third gender, two-spirit, bigender, and trans man and trans woman. Likewise, the term transsexual commonly falls under the umbrella term transgender, but some transsexual people object to this. Intersex inclusion. Main article, Intersex and LGBT. Those who add intersex people to LGBT groups or organizations may use the extended initialism LGBT or LGBT. The relationship of intersex to lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans, and queer communities is complex, but intersex people are often added to the LGBT category to create an LGBT community. Some intersex people prefer the initialism LGBT, while others would rather that they not be included as part of the term. Emi Koyama describes how inclusion of intersex in LGBT can fail to address intersex-specific human rights issues, including creating false impressions that intersex people's rights are protected by laws protecting LGBT people, and failing to acknowledge that many intersex people are not LGBT. Organization Intersex International Australia states that some intersex individuals are same-sex attracted, and some are heterosexual, but LGBT activism has fought for the rights of people who fall outside of expected binary sex and gender norms. Julius Kagwa of SIPD Uganda has written that, while the gay community offers us a place of relative safety, it is also oblivious to our specific needs. Numerous studies have shown higher rates of same-sex attraction in intersex people, with a recent Australian study of people born with atypical sex characteristics finding that 52% of respondents were non-heterosexual. Thus, research on intersex subjects has been used to explore means of preventing homosexuality. As an experience of being born with sex characteristics that do not fit social norms, intersex can be distinguished from transgender, while some intersex people are both intersex and transgender. Asexual, aromantic, and agender inclusion. Main articles, Asexuality, Aromanticism, and Agender. In the early 2010s, asexuality and aromanticism started gaining wider recognition. Around 2015 they were started to be included in the expanded initialism LGBTQIA, with the A standing for asexual, aromatic, commonly grouped together as aspec along with agender. Some people have mistakenly claimed the A stands for ally, but allies are not a marginalized group, and mentions of A for ally have regularly sparked controversy as a form of LGBT erasure. Criticism of the term. The initialisms LGBT or GLBT are not agreed to by everyone that they encompass. For example, some argue that transgender and transsexual causes are not the same as that of lesbian, gay, and bisexual, LGBT, people. This argument centers on the idea that being transgender or transsexual has to do more with gender identity, or a person's understanding of being or not being a man or a woman irrespective of their sexual orientation. LGBT issues can be seen as a matter of sexual orientation or attraction. These distinctions have been made in the context of political action in which LGBT goals, such as same-sex marriage legislation and human rights work, which may not include transgender and intersex people, may be perceived to differ from transgender and transsexual goals. A belief in lesbian and gay separatism, not to be confused with the related lesbian separatism, holds that lesbians and gay men form, or should form, a community distinct and separate from other groups normally included in the LGBTQ sphere. While not always appearing of sufficient number or organization to be called a movement, separatists are a significant, vocal, and active element within many parts of the LGBT community. In some cases, separatists will deny the existence or right to equality of bisexual orientations and of transsexuality, sometimes leading public biphobia and transphobia. In contrasts to separatists, Peter Tatchell of the LGBT human rights group Outrage argues that to separate the transgender movement from the LGB would be political madness, stating that queers are, like transgender people, gender deviant. We don't conform to traditional heterosexist assumptions of male and female behavior, in that we have sexual and emotional relationships with the same sex. We should celebrate our discordance with mainstream straight norms. The portrayal of an all-encompassing LGBT community, or LGB community, is also disliked by some lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. Some do not subscribe to or approve of the political and social solidarity and visibility and human rights campaigning that normally goes with it, including gay pride marches and events. Some of them believe that grouping together people with non-heterosexual orientations perpetuates the myth that being gay/lesbian/bi/asexual/pansexual/etc. makes a person deficiently different from other people. These people are often less visible compared to more mainstream gay or LGBT activists. Since this faction is difficult to distinguish from the heterosexual majority, it is common for people to assume all LGBT people support LGBT liberation and the visibility of LGBT people in society, including the right to live one's life differently from the majority. In the 1996 book Anti-Gay, a collection of essays edited by Mark Simpson, the concept of a one-size-fits-all identity based on LGBT stereotypes is criticized for suppressing the individuality of LGBT people. Writing in the BBC News magazine in 2014, Julie Bindel questions whether the various gender groupings now, bracketed together, share the same issues, values, and goals. Bindel refers to a number of possible new initialisms for differing combinations and concludes that it may be time for the alliances to either be reformed or go their separate ways. In 2015, the slogan "Drop the T" was coined to encourage LGBT organizations to stop support of transgender people. The campaign has been widely condemned by many LGBT groups as transphobic. Alternative terms. Queer. Many people have looked for a generic term to replace the numerous existing initialisms. Words such as queer, an umbrella term for sexual and gender minorities, and rainbow have been tried, but most have not been widely adopted. Queer has many negative connotations to older people who remember the word as a taunt and insult, and such negative usage of the term continues. Many younger people also understand queer to be more politically charged than LGBT. SGM GSM GSRM. SGM, or GSM 101, an abbreviation for sexual and gender minorities, has gained particular currency in government, academia, and medicine. It has been adopted by the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and the UCLA Williams Institute, which studies SGM law and policy. Duke University and the University of California, San Francisco both have prominent sexual and gender minority health programs. An NIH paper recommends the term SGM because it is inclusive of those who may not self-identify as LGBT, or those who have a specific medical condition affecting reproductive development. A publication from the White House Office of Management and Budget states, "We believe that SGM is more inclusive, because it includes persons not specifically referenced by the identities listed in LGBT, and a UK government paper favors SGM because initials like LGBTQ+ stand for terms that, especially outside the global north, are not necessarily inclusive of local understandings and terms used to describe sexual and gender minorities." An example of usage outside the global north is the Constitution of Nepal, which identifies gender and sexual minorities as a protected class. GSRM is also used to include romantic minorities such as aromanticism. Rainbow. Rainbow has connotations that recall hippies, New Age movements, and groups such as the Rainbow Family or Jesse Jackson's Rainbow/Push Coalition. SGL, same-gender loving, is sometimes favored among gay male African Americans as a way of distinguishing themselves from what they regard as white-dominated LGBT communities. Further umbrella terms. In Canada especially, the term 2SLGBTQ+ is seen, with the first two characters standing for two-spirit. The whole term stands for two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer and questioning, and is intended as a term encompassing all sexual and gender minorities. For some Indigenous people, two-spirit invokes a combination of identities, including sexual, gender, cultural, and spiritual. Some people advocate the term minority sexual and gender identities, MSGI, coined in 2000, for the purpose of explicitly including all people who are not cisgender and heterosexual or gender, sexual, and romantic minorities, GSRM, which is more explicitly inclusive of minority romantic orientations and polyamory, but those have not been widely adopted either. Other rare umbrella terms are gender and sexual diversities, GSD, MOGI, marginalized orientations, gender identities, and intersex, and MAGI, marginalized orientations, gender alignments, and intersex. Clinical. In public health settings, MSM, men who have sex with men, is clinically used to describe men who have sex with other men without referring to their sexual orientation, with WSW, women who have sex with women, also used as an analogous term. MFOF. MFOF is an abbreviation for Mahu, Vakazalewa, Palapa, Faafafine, Akava-ine, Facality, Liti, and Fakafafine. This term was developed by Phil Esha Brown-Acton in 2010 at the Asia-Pacific Games Human Rights Conference. This refers to those in the Rainbow Pacifica community that may or may not identify with the LGBT acronym.